Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Roundup. I am your host, David Fox. With me, as usual, is my wonderful and extremely well-organized co-host, UberHansen. We are here because the NFL draft is now over. Thankfully, mercifully, it's over. Those last couple weeks, they're brutal and unnecessary, and I don't like it. But we're here now. We're done. We did day 3 coverage here at the Roundup. We were, I say we. You were probably more exhausted than I were because I left after 2.5 hours because I went to work. But yeah, it all went very well, and it seemed like you all seemed to enjoy your time with us. And now we're here to talk about the draft now that it is officially done and in the books. Before we get too far into this, Uber, how are you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you completely on all this draft stuff, man. Like, it was really wearing me down towards the end here. So I think I was more happy when it finally ended than during the actual draft itself.
Yeah, honestly, that's fair. But it's done. It's over now. We get to talk about it, and that's exactly what we're gonna do. Before we get into this, we're gonna talk about our wonderful friends over at One Pass. And that is going to be taken care of by Greg and Aaron.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Thank you to Greg and Aaron for your incredible professionalism, as always, with the exact same ad read every single time. We also have our wonderful friends over at Underdog Fantasy, who are continuing to sponsor the show. Folks, if your one home league is not enough for you and that one draft just doesn't scratch the itch enough, Underdog Fantasy is for you. You have all the fun of drafting your own players, but without the waivers and lineup decisions. Best ball drafts allow you to have all the fun of drafting your own team, all the chances to win big, and none of the week-to-week hassle. If you use the promo code COVER1 when signing up to make your first deposit, Underdog will match that deposit up to $100. That is a free $100 in free play if you use the promo code COVER1. Sign up today and start winning. Oh, I was going to say, I usually take the graphic off and I went away from it. Start winning today. So we're gonna get into this. We're gonna have fun with this. Spin starts us off with a great comment. Great, the host who made a complete mockery of the draft process and lacked complete professionalism, allowing a crayon on the show. I think it was just one step too far. You're allowed to think that. You're allowed to believe that. I go back to, I don't remember which year it was, but there was a point in the 4th round, maybe the 5th round, can't quite remember, during NFL Network's coverage where they had a gorilla announce the pick by tapping a screen because they trained the gorilla to tap the screen to show who was getting picked. I consider that to be my benchmark in terms of professionalism when covering the draft. So, does the crayon beat that? Who's to say? But in either case, the crayon is in the room with us, and that is Kyle Salaki, former co-host of the Cover One Roundup, founder of the Cover One Roundup. I don't know if he's the founder or not. We'll pretend that he is. So, now that Jordan Poyer is no longer here, Jordan Poyer's driver, I guess, can't be on the show as Jordan Poyer's driver. So now he's Quintez Cephas's bookie. You all can look that up if you want to look up that particular story of why he's no longer in Detroit and why he's in Buffalo now. JSZ says, all aboard the Keon Coleman hype train. I agree. And that's largely just because he's on the Bills right now and all that. But we are going to get into reasons why you should like Keon Coleman. Yeah, let's just start there. Let's just start at the top.
Yep.
Just like a mock draft, we'll start at the top. We'll go for like 30, 40 minutes, and everyone will be like, "You're not getting through the whole draft in this period." It's like, yes, we are. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Yeah. So let's talk about Keon Coleman, because it's funny that he ended up getting picked, because for our show in particular, right? Like we had a whole discussion about like the relevance of the combine based on Keon Coleman's performance. And I think both of us made very good points. You were a bit more articulate about your points, so I'll let you lead off this discussion about Keon Coleman with the Bills.
Yeah, I mean, just throwing back to that discussion, and it surrounded the idea of the 40-yard dash being absolutely overly blown as a metric of use, right? There's all these players historically that have had incredible 40 times. John Ross is the one that comes to mind. And at least from my memory of that combine, and I don't know what year that was, John Ross really wasn't a super high pick or expected to be super high. I mean, second round, maybe third round. And then you ran a blazing fast 40, and suddenly everyone's like, John Ross, you have to draft John Ross. Well, he did absolutely nothing in the NFL. And then you look at somebody like Keon Coleman, who ran the 40-yard dash and didn't run it all that great. He ran a 4.64, which is not good. The wild part to that is he still scored in the 90th percentile athletically for wide receiver positions.
Right.
Like, he's still incredibly athletic. Just because he couldn't blow out of a 3-point stance and run a 4.4. And another part to this, we're talking about 0.15 seconds. Like, you're talking about such a minuscule amount of time that it blows my mind that people put so much emphasis on it. And then he goes and runs the gauntlet and runs that at like 21 miles an hour, the fastest in the entire combine. Like, this idea,
and not just for this combine, but for like all combines that have been like tracking this particular data point.
Yeah. And I think I saw a stat today where on go routes or something, he had like the third highest GPS track time speed in all of college professional. It's wild that people look at the 40-yard dash and use that as a reason to say he's essentially undraftable. There's legitimate criticisms of him, I think, and you could even probably point to the 40 as being a part of that criticism package. But this idea that he was undraftable solely because of a 40 time is mind-boggling to me.
I don't know if anybody said undraftable, but but I do agree that like there was a very there was a lot of weird negativity that came out because of that 40-yard dash time. And in reality, you look at how he plays, you look at all the other sort of supporting data around him, and you kind of say, whatever, it is what it is. And when you look at what he can be, I mean, and especially when you look at his time at Florida State last year, right? Like, they were a very successful team, and Keon Coleman was a big part of that. But that offense, when you look at it week to week, it's really not, schematically speaking, a good offense, in my opinion. It's a very, very collegey offense. And the fact that they were using Keon Coleman in the sort of way that they were using him was oversimplified, right? And I think that from that, people sort of got the impression that his game was oversimplified. And I don't think that's the case. I do think that he is a work in progress. And I think there's a lot of room to grow. But I do think that he has the ability to grow. And I think that when you look back, and actually the video that was posted just before our show went live, that Eric did about Keon Coleman and sort of breaking down his differences between his time at Florida State and his time at Michigan State is interesting because of the styles of offense that those two teams ran. And you sort of see at least better willingness to do different things at Michigan State. I also appreciate that he's a very, very strong run blocker, right? Like that was something that you don't always see. Yeah, there's a channel on YouTube that has done cut-ups like every target and catch for a particular player or whatever, and I've watched that Keon Coleman one like a couple of different times now. But of course, targets and catches doesn't mean run blocking plays, right? Because that doesn't get in there. So seeing that as highlighted was a good thing as well. However, when you watch Coleman, you see the potential, and I think that people are kind of viewing him as like this contested catch guy, and kind of making him trying to be like Mike Williams. Mm. And I watch Keon Coleman, and I don't see Mike Williams, because Mike Williams is truly a one-trick pony, and he's very good at that one trick. Arguably better than many people in the NFL at that one trick. But it is just that one trick. And that only has taken him so far in the NFL, despite being a top 10 pick. Whereas you look at Keon Coleman, I see potential for Keon Coleman to take that next step, to learn how to run routes a little bit more better. Because I think he does have that sort of ability in him, and and I think he has the ability to break off routes well. I think he has better agility than people probably give him credit for. And at the end of the day, he also has really great hands, a really good catch process, and he's made some really great catches in contested situations, even if last year at Florida State was not the best for him in those particular circumstances. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they were very predictable in how they used him. It was like, here's some bubble screens, here's a go route, here's a hitch route. Like, it was very, very air raid type of offense, which is a very oversimplified offense for wide receivers in particular. And I think that you look at what Keon Coleman can be, I think that's what Buffalo is thinking about, right? And the last thing that I'll say is there were people, particularly people at Cover One, like Eric and Adam, and I think Anthony probably felt this way as well, along with some others, that Keon Coleman didn't make sense in the pre-draft process for the Bills because of the type of receivers that the Bills tend to take. And I think that, those sorts of receivers like a Cole Beasley or a Stephon Diggs or even a Gabe Davis, who, as Eric often says, flash open with the way that they run their routes. And Keon Coleman doesn't really have that. First of all, I'd say that Keon Coleman at least has that ability, even if he hasn't shown that yet. That may just be more my opinion than anything else. Mm-hmm. But the other aspect to this is that even if I say that that's true, that he's not necessarily their type of receiver from a schematic and style standpoint, he is their type of player from a philosophical standpoint. He's young, he's unproven totally, and he's got all the tools available to him. He's somebody that they can mold how they want, and that's been their MO typically with most of their top draft picks. Yeah. Josh Allen, Tremaine Edmonds, Greg Rousseau, even guys like Kyer Elam and Ed Oliver to an extent, right? Like, they take these guys who are just super, super talented and say, look, we can make something out of this. And more often than not, that's true. They have made quite a bit out of it. In fact, they've made most of their career out of making Josh Allen, who many people thought was an unmoldable product, into one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, I love chasing that upside too, because the Bills essentially swinging for the fences was something I said the entire pre-draft process. I wanted them to go big or kind of go home to that extent. Like, Keon Coleman turns 21 in just a few days, or in a few weeks here. Like, he still has a lot of untapped potential. And you brought up the other players like Greg Rousseau, like Josh Allen, who came into the league as fairly raw prospects that had to reach their upside to be considered a solid to great pick in the draft. Both of them, Josh Allen obviously hit his upside completely. Greg Rousseau, I think, is getting there. But when it comes to Keon Coleman, I like the idea of his ceiling is still really, really high, but I love that he has that blocking ability because it raises his floor. Even if he doesn't ever evolve into an elite X receiver, at a minimum, you got a dude that can block and also has this contested catch ability, has the top end speed when he catches the field and can pick up yak. There's a lot to like here. I mean, I think that people just soured on him. If he doesn't run that 40 time, if he runs a 4.5, which is more respectable, I don't think the Bills fans that are pissed off about this pick are pissed off at all. I think they just lost their minds over this 4-6, whatever it was, and they can't get it out of their head. Do I love the Keon Coleman pick? I don't think I love it. Do I hate it? No. Am I okay with it? Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's sort of where I'm at, where it's like, okay, I am not like over the moon with this pick, and partially because, like I said, he is a big ball of clay that they're going to have to mold, and that's a great idea, but they need him, and I've already said they need him to contribute right away, which sort of makes you concerned. You know, at the end of the day, they do have other options, despite what some people might feel. You know, Curtis Samuel is an option, Dalton Kincaid and Khalil Shakir are options, James Cook out of the backfield is an option. Like, there are other players on this team that can help and contribute in this year, but you take a receiver at that point because you feel like he's going to contribute in a meaningful way as a rookie. And I do think that's possible. I just think it may be in a more limited capacity than people would want. But that in itself does not mean that his projection from there is going to be the exact same, right? Like, he's somebody that I think could take a big leap from year 1 to year 2. And if that's the case, then all the better. You know, and especially when you look at the fact that he was at 2 different schools, and the last place he was at just really, you know, sort of viewed him more as a role player and kind of just stuck him in that role despite how he didn't necessarily fit that. You kind of feel like this is a good situation for him to be in, right? Like, this is a place where he will learn how to grow as a player. He will learn how to run routes a little bit better. I think that this is a good pick that has the potential to be a great pick. But also, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, this is amazing and the perfect pick, right? Like, yeah, and especially because I probably preferred someone like a Ladd McConkey over Keon Coleman. And, of course, Ladd went directly after Keon Coleman after the Chargers traded up for him. But that doesn't also mean that Keon Coleman is going to be bad or disappointing. And honestly, I think you talk about the 4-yard dash being sort of the source of disappointment for some Bills fans. I think the source of disappointment more comes from people being butthurt over the fact that they traded with the Chiefs.
Oh my God.
Which is, I don't know if that's dumber or like, look, I'm gonna say something, and it's gonna sound like I'm making this up because I don't think I've ever complimented this particular person before now, but Tyler Dunn actually wrote a very interesting article for his website, Go Long, and he basically talked about how the mentality to make that trade is a positive step because it means that the Bills aren't afraid of the Chiefs.
Boom, yep.
And they shouldn't be. Yes, they've knocked you out of the playoffs before. A couple of times. 3 times. That doesn't mean that you should just be afraid of them forever and that you can't make trades with rivals. I mean, my God. Like, it's so funny seeing the reaction to that trade and then thinking back, even just the last few years of trades. And, like, the Vikings and Lions have traded with each other multiple times over the last couple of years, including the Lions sending TJ Hawkinson to the Vikings for a pick, like, in the middle of the season. And then you had, what was it, a couple of years ago when the Eagles, the Cowboys, the Giants, and the Eagles had picks back to back to back in that draft. The Eagles traded with the Cowboys to get in front of the Giants to get Devontae Smith. Like, why is nobody talking about that from the Cowboys' perspective? They would probably want Devontae Smith to go with CeeDee Lamb right now, right? I don't get why this was such a big thing, and those sorts of trades are just sort of like, yeah, but the past is the past, right? And honestly, in a few years, we will probably say the past is the past, because maybe Keon Coleman works out and maybe Xavier Worthy does.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's one way or the other. That in itself doesn't matter. You have to do what's right for your team. You can't sit here and, piss around just to be scared of another team. Like, that doesn't make any sense. That's not how you do not make your team better by focusing on making the other team worse, right? Like, you focus on making your team better, and that's how you will win games.
Yeah, the fact that people are mad about this trade absolutely blew my mind at the time, and it's still blowing my mind. And the weird things that they're bringing up too, people bringing up the Patrick Mahomes trade, the Bills trading down with the Chiefs. It's so far disconnected from the strategies of these two. And guess what? People are like, "Oh, the Bills got fleeced, or they that trade ruined them." No, it didn't. No, it absolutely. The Bills ended up getting two All-Pros out of it. Obviously, they don't get Patrick Mahomes. I don't know if Patrick Mahomes works out in Buffalo the same way he worked out in Kansas City.
No.
So you get Trey White, and then you get assets to go get Josh Allen. I'm perfectly fine with that trade. How people are connecting that to Xavier Worthy. What it comes down to is Bills fans being afraid that they just got their Tyreek Hill.
Right.
Another time. I don't give a shit. Honestly, I do not care. Like, it doesn't matter at this point because the Bills were not going to take him. The Bills were not taking Xavier Worthy. So unless you wanted the Bills to take a player that they literally did not want, and they told you they do not want him, they also told you that they didn't want Xavier Legette because they traded with the Panthers who took him. So they told you they didn't want him either. If the Bills don't trade with the Chiefs, who the Cowboys might have, the Ravens might have, the 49ers might have, like any of those teams could have done it. It doesn't make sense to be pissed about this. And if this is also, and you're right, is another reason why people don't like the Keon Coleman pick, it's even further absurdity to me because the Bills picked up assets and in reality still got their guy.
Right. As opposed to the Chiefs, who in all likelihood probably would have gotten their guy. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, right? Like, there may have been another team that wanted Xavier Worthy and between 28 and 32. But based on what was there and who was going to be picking, it kind of seems like Xavier Worthy would have been available at 32 and the Chiefs traded up and got him. Granted, the Chiefs didn't necessarily give up this huge, ransom for it. I mean, your own trade chart said that was an even trade, essentially. And the Bills end up getting what they wanted, which was getting back into the third round and taking one of their fourth round picks to move back into the third round. Mm-hmm. So I don't really get the whole sort of uptightness about this trade in particular. It just doesn't make sense to me. All right, we've talked a lot, so I'm going to go into some comments here. Spin says the balls stick to his hand when he catches balls. The ball just stops dead in its tracks. I think has always come back to guys who play basketball and have to learn how to catch a ball with one hand while moving and go right into rhythm and dribble down the court, right? Like guys who can just take that very much bigger ball than what a football is, right? And then being able to just grab it and take it and take control of it. I think that comes from that. You see guys with that background who very similar style of doing that. Kyle Salagi, the disgraced former co-host of the Cover One Roundup, he should unironically ask Stevie, I'm assuming Johnson, how he implemented his basketball experience into his route running. Yeah, honestly, that is you want to talk about somebody who won pretty much exclusively because he was a top tier route runner. It's Stevie Johnson. He was not super fast. He wasn't that big. He didn't necessarily have the best hands in the world, but the dude knew how to just shake guys off of him. Let's see. Bill, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I don't know what happened there. The government's after me now. Bills fan 7883 says, when I watch Worthy, I don't see 4.2. He's fast, but he never uses his speed like a burner. I would argue on film, it appears Coleman is faster. Size might skew that. He plays real fast. I do agree that size probably does skew that because Coleman has these massive strides on him. And I would also argue that there's definitely times where Xavier Worthy is using that 4.2 speed, where he's burning people down the sideline. I also don't think he's going to be like Tyreek Hill, because Tyreek Hill is like a one-of-one type of player in his own right. Like, I don't necessarily see that. If anything, he's probably going to be closer to like a Deshaun Jackson type, where Andy Reid just sets him off the line and tries to get him as much space as possible so he can just beat dudes deep and maybe get him a little bit of space underneath so he can take 6 yards and turn it into 60. Like, that would be how I think Andy Reid would use him. But then again, I'm not Andy Reid, so he probably has a much better plan than I do, I would think. Let's see. Spin 0481 says, I wanted speed. I wanted a speed wide receiver to pair with Diggs. Well, you didn't get either. So, yeah, I can imagine disappointment in feeling that. RJ says, this team desperately needs a wide receiver one. If they had that, then you have an amazing wide receiver group. I understand there's concern about, like, Keon Coleman's ceiling as a wide receiver. I think that ceiling is as a wide receiver one. I think that there is a distinct possibility within the realms of possibilities that Keon Coleman ends up sort of in the realm of like a Mike Evans. And wouldn't we all like a good Mike Evans on our team?
Yeah.
Let's see. Tristan Parsons says, I saw pre-draft evaluations that said his best fit is in a Sean Payton style offense, which Brady is a disciple of. So that also makes me feel confident the team's playing for him. I mean, we had Max Toscano on our coverage for day 3. He's watched that Joe Brady offense plenty. And he felt like the fit would work. And his main concern really was splitting the sort of slot responsibilities between Dalton Kincaid and Khalil Shakir, which is a fair thing to talk about. I think that they will probably, my own speculation, of course, will probably end up using Kincaid a bit more outside than they will in the slot, than people are probably thinking. But I do agree that is a concern. But I also think that having Keon Coleman in this type of offense is a very good thing as well. Joe DeRosa says, he cussed. You did the thing. I got to put the explicit tag. I pretty much always put the explicit tag on these, but whatever. Kyle also says the Bills also weren't in the market for a QB in the Mahomes draft. They were 2 days away from firing their GM. People forget about this. Yeah. Like if Patrick Mahomes had been drafted by the Bills in 2017, like he would have probably started at some point in that season to replace Tyrod Taylor, or maybe they just would have gotten rid of Tyrod Taylor. I don't know. Who knows what goes through the mind of a rookie head coach of Sean McDermott? Yeah.
He probably would have started
Tyrod Taylor for Nate Peterman or something.
I was going to say, he probably would have started against the Saints, and who knows? People would have still been mad for something.
Right. And then, you factor in the fact that his offensive coordinator was Rick Dennison, and his best receiver that year was Zay Jones, like Kelvin Benjamin when he came in. What are we doing here? Come on.
Yeah.
Quintus Cephas's bookie says, so who won the draft? Great question. We'll get back to you in about 4 years. Let's see. He also says the house always wins. A fan of Fallout New Vegas, obviously. Let's see. Adam Luloff says, I was concerned at first, but if they could teach Coleman to separate better, I think they nailed it. Honestly, yeah, probably. I really do like this pick. Again, I don't necessarily love it. I'm not in love with it right now. But there's, to me, a clear path for this to work. And this is this type of pick that they needed to do. And, I'm fine with it. I like it. I think that there's real potential for success here. Any other thoughts before we move on?
No, I mean, I guess the one last thing I'll say is I don't think that this year the Bills need a wide receiver one, but I would like them to have one, and I would especially like them to have one in the future. They just need that trio of Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, and Khalil Shakir to push close to 2,400 yards. If that
Sure.
happens, if at the end of the year those three combine for 2,400, the Bills would be perfectly fine.
Which is about 800 yards apiece, by the way,
Yep.
for those who can't do the math. I understand math is tricky for some people. We're trying to be helpful here. All right, moving on. With the second round pick, their second round pick in the NFL draft, the Buffalo Bills took at pick 60 safety Cole Bishop from the University of Utah. This was interesting to me. This was seemingly a little bit higher than I think a lot of people had Cole Bishop at, but not so high that it felt like a huge reach necessarily. You know, it wasn't like a T'Vondre Sweat to the Tennessee Titans at pick 39 for some odd, strange reason. But it felt like a reach to some people, probably the majority of people. But again, you end up in a place that will know how to use you, because when they take defensive backs, they know how to use defensive backs. Oh, but Kaiir Elam didn't do anything. Kaiir Elam was picked partially because the Chiefs traded in front of the Bills to take Trent McDuffie in that draft, and they needed to take a cornerback, or they felt like they needed to take a cornerback. And Kaiir Elam, even though his athletic profile doesn't necessarily fit what the Bills normally have at cornerback, was good enough for the Bills to just say, let's just take a chance on this and see what we can do with him. So far, it hasn't worked out. Doesn't mean it can't. There's still 2 years left for Kaiir Elam to figure something out. A new cornerbacks coach to help him integrate into this defense, and seemingly a greater shift in philosophy to have more man coverage, which brings us back to Cole Bishop, because it seems like the thing that really attracted the Bills to Cole Bishop, outside of being that sort of interchangeable safety type that they like, is the fact that he can hang onto tight ends in man coverage. That seemed to be one of the main sticking points, at least in my mind, that I heard when they talked about Cole Bishop.
Yeah, I mean, that's become kind of a, I don't know what to say, like an issue for the Bills for years, right? They've been trying to figure out ways to slow down tight ends, mainly ones whose last names end with Elsie. So Cole Bishop being the pick there, I mean, I'm not surprised that the Bills took a defensive back in the first, 2-3 rounds. I wanted Cooper DeJean. That obviously didn't happen.
We all did. Got him. I shouldn't say we all did, but most people wanted some sort of defensive back at some point. So
yeah, but okay. So my one fear with Cole Bishop is Cole Bishop, Mike Edwards, Taylor Rapp are the three safeties on the team. None of them are that pure center fielder, right? That dude that I can sit back there and you're not going to get beat over the top. But with Cole Bishop, yet again, going back to that Greg Rousseau idea, that Josh Allen idea, he has literally all the tools. He is a freak athlete. He's an absolute heat-seeking missile when he comes down and lays the boom on people. I trust Sean McDermott to be able to teach Cole Bishop how to read defenses, how to sit back there and wait and make plays on the ball. I think that the Cole Bishop pick might end up being my favorite pick in this draft, just because I'm so excited about what he can do with Sean McDermott. And adding to that, I would bet that the Bills reached out to Dalton Kincaid and said, "Hey, Dalton, what do you think about this guy?" And if Kincaid gave him glowing review,
they talked about that just talking to Bishop on the phone. They were like, "Listen, we talked to Dalton about you, and he basically confirmed everything that we thought about you." So yeah, that definitely factors into it. I think that when you take guys in back-to-back years from the same school, as long as they actually did play together, you talk to those guys, and with someone like Bishop coming from a place like Utah, where their coach Kyle Whittingham, I believe is the name of the Utah Utes head coach, he's done a great job over the last couple of years creating really good NFL caliber defenders, sort of similar to what you're seeing from the University of Illinois in the last couple of years, where guys like Sidney Brown and Jerjon Newton and others have come out of there and really made an impact in the NFL. Devon Witherspoon being another one, but with Utah, like these are the sorts of guys that come out and you have a pretty good idea of what they're going to be, at least to start their NFL career. And then with someone like Bishop, and I get what you're saying with the current safety room, right? With Rapp and Edwards and Bishop, there's not that feeling of a sort of center fielding type. I always just go back to the idea that that's not really how this defense plays out 9 times out of 10, because of the way that they rotate coverages, right? Like it's in a lot of ways, it's sort of like what Cincinnati did when they had Jesse Bates and Von Bell. Now, in a similar way, like if you were to do sort of a one-to-one comparison of Jesse Bates and Von Bell to Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, you'd probably say, well, Bell is sort of like Poyer and Hyde is sort of like Bates. Yep. Okay, sure. I would agree with that. But they use those guys in similar ways in a sort of broad sense that they would rotate those guys in coverage in order to disguise those coverages. Watch Disguise coverage on Tuesday nights, by the way. And
good.
Thank you. Always got to plug, right? But more than that, right? Like you have to be able to have guys that are interchangeable. And I think when you watch Cole Bishop, that interchangeability is there. That is the big part of his game. He's willing to, he can rotate deep and get to his landmarks exactly when he needs to. He's smart enough, he's athletic enough to be able to do that. You want to talk about 40-yard dash time if we're going to use that. The man ran a 4.45. And, that is the great white safety for you. So.
Chris Sims, right?
Good old Chris Sims, right? But, you have that aspect to his game. And then the thing that really pops out, though, if you just go and watch, like, Utah defense this year, you will just see Cole Bishop flying towards the line of scrimmage in a way that is aggressive but not reckless. You know, it's intelligent but it's aggressive, and whenever he goes to make a tackle, I feel like he is always looking to rip the ball out, punch the ball out, like try to create turnovers and friction, and that to me, like watching Cole Bishop after the Bills took him, I'm not going to pretend that I watched him before the Bills took him, because I was not focused on safeties that much throughout this process, especially after free agency. But when I did watch Cole Bishop after he was picked, I said, man, this makes so much sense. It's no wonder they wanted this dude. It makes perfect sense. I don't know what other thoughts you have about him.
I love the aggressive but not reckless, which is almost not quite the opposite, but then you have Taylor Rapp, who's aggressive and reckless. So the idea of having the two of them on, I was saying earlier this offseason, I wanted a little bit more nasty on the Bills defense. I wanted people to be a little bit afraid to play this team. And I think that if you put Cole Bishop deep and you put Taylor Rapp deep on the field at the same time, there's going to be a little fear from those wide receivers going over the middle. I'm not saying headhunt. I'm not saying do that. But if you got guys that can absolutely destroy receivers, if they're just left hung out to dry, like Cole Bishop's one of those, and he's a big guy too. He's not like a little dude. And then like I said, Taylor Rapp, he'll just come flying like a human spear and try to light you up. So I do like the concept of adding that element to the Bills defense, because I think earlier on in Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde's career, that fear existed with the two of them deep. Over the past 2 years, that started to wane a little bit due to injuries, due to their play speed slowing down a little bit. Now our play speed is going to be through the roof because this guy plays real fast.
100%. And that's a big part of this whole process, right? And I was a little surprised that they took a safety this early that wasn't like one of the, or really just any sort of defensive back early. But in particular safety, just because, I mean, we've talked about this plenty of times where they tend to take some sort of defensive back late in the draft and coach them up and they turn into a at least reasonable player. But clearly they felt like, okay, we like Taylor Rapp enough that we gave him a 3-year contract. But we also have Mike Edwards, but that's a 1-year contract. And maybe this is a situation, and maybe they felt like this is a situation where we need to have with certainty, as Brandon Bean always does, we need to have certainty that we have guys that we like at starting at safety in these spots. Even if it's not somebody that we feel like is part of the future plans of this team. So bring in Mike Edwards for a 1-year deal, and if Cole Bishop is not on the board, or whoever safety is on the board that we really, really like, then we at least have Mike Edwards there for us. Turns out they have Cole Bishop now, and if that wasn't the guy that they wanted, they wouldn't have... I get the feeling they would not have forced a safety pick at that spot. I don't know what other pick they would have made at that point, and I think it's kind of useless speculation to make. I mean, if you want to do it, go ahead. But I do think that this was clearly a guy that they really, really wanted, and that's what matters right now. Getting a safety that they love.
Yeah, and I think having those 3 safeties is something they really liked last year with Taylor Rapp when they started playing that 3 safety set. I think that that's part of it this year. They can play all 3 of them. It's not just going to be who wins in camp. Those 2 are the guys that play 100% of the snaps, and the third guy's just the backup. I think that these 3 guys all are legitimately going to play a significant amount of snaps. It's just who are going to be your 2 primary starters, and then the third will rotate in, in dime packages.
Yeah, I totally agree. Bills fan 7883 says Daniel Jeremiah is pretty good at evaluating safeties. He says he is Harrison Smith. If Cole Bishop is Harrison Smith, I will take that 100 days out of 100 days. That is a lofty comparison to make, in my opinion. Harrison Smith has been one of the best safeties of the last decade. Bean and McDermott have wanted him for years. There was always rumors. Sure, I guess I'll believe that. Tristan Parsons says, also, Utah has a pretty good track record with producing quality NFL DBs. So I'm going to use this as a jumping off point. First of all, I agree with that point because I kind of made that point partially. But there's this notion in scouting circles, right? Don't helmet scout. Oh, don't just look at a helmet and be like, oh, well, they can't succeed because they're a quarterback from Alabama or whatever, or a quarterback from USC, and those guys never work out, blah, blah, blah. I agree. Don't helmet scout, whether it's good or bad. Also, there's something to be said about the fact that when you have guys that come from a particular place with a coach that's been established there for a long time, you start to see patterns develop. There's a reason why there's a lot of receivers that come out of LSU. There's a reason why there's often a lot of defensive backs that come from the University of Alabama. It's because Nick Saban knew how to coach up defensive backs really, really well. Mm-hmm. And NFL teams knew that. And so they would say, hey, we know, generally speaking, what we're getting with this safety or corner from the University of Alabama. Doesn't mean they're all the same. They're certainly not. Some are more successful than others, right? Patrick Surtain is certainly a much more successful story than A.D. Milliner was. Both Alabama cornerbacks, both with Nick Saban, but one was clearly better than the other. So there's a reason to say something like Utah has a pretty good track record with producing quality NFL defensive backs because there is a history there. Their coach Kyle Whittingham has done a good job there. He's been there for a long time now. There's also something to be said about taking that as just another piece of the puzzle, right? Yeah. That is the thing. If there's one thing that I could say about scouting, don't make one piece of the puzzle and make it the whole puzzle, right? Mm-hmm. Don't take RAS score as your reason for loving or hating a player, and don't take 40-yard dash as that, and don't take where they went to school or this or that, or whether the Pukul is plain wet and scouted this particular area. But they're all just pieces of the puzzle to get you as close to the full picture as you possibly can. Yeah. Because you're never, ever going to get the full picture until they actually play in the NFL. That's the whole point. But the closer you can get to that full picture, the better sense you have of that player and whether or not they actually have a real shot at succeeding in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I do like the idea of looking at colleges just to kind of get some background on like the abilities of the coaching staff there, but it's not the end all and be all. Otherwise, only great quarterbacks would come from a single school, and Josh Allen came from Wyoming. I don't think I could name another quarterback that ever played for
Right.
Wyoming. So I do like looking at you. Like I just pulled up Utah's like the names there. You got Jalen Johnson, Eric Rowe,
Yep.
Eric Weddle. There's a couple good names there. So yeah, there's some good history there. And the head coach Kyle Whittingham began his career essentially as a defensive backs coordinator. As far I think, unless I have that wrong. No, he was defensive line. Then he was defensive coordinator and safeties coach. So yeah, he has a background in that that teaching style.
Yeah, it's just, it makes sense. It really does make sense. Chris, okay, so is it Janky or Chunky? I never know. I see him on Twitter a lot.
I've talked to Chris a lot. I say Janky, but
you say
can correct
Janky.
me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
Okay. Janky just sounds like janky, right? Like that's janky or whatever, but whatever. If it's janky, it's janky. I'm excited to see Bishop as a blitzer in the Bills defense. I also like that Bishop can cover tight ends as well. They lost that aspect of their defense when they lost Milano to injury. It's not wrong. I mean, that is, I think, two parts of his game that are that the Bills looked at and probably said, yeah, this is a major reason why we're taking this guy in particular. Adam Luloff says they probably draft another safety next year. Yeah, they might. Depends on how. Honestly, that decision probably depends more on how Taylor Rapp does this year than anything else. Because Mike Edwards is on a 1-year deal. You have now draft Cole Bishop. Whether what they decide to do at safety in the future probably depends more on Taylor Rapp than anything else.
Yeah.
Let's see. Johnny Martin says, I heard Bills picked up a player who had ACL surgery. Did they?
Johnny he mentioned Javon Solomon, who we'll get to a little bit later.
Okay.
I was just looking at Banged Up Bills to see if there's any reference to ACL. It looks like he has surgery, but it was undisclosed what for, so it could have been ACL. But that was in following the 2022 season. So
well,
yeah.
Okay. He had a pretty great season after that, so I think it's fine. So, are we good on Cole Bishop talk?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to Dwayne Carter, the defensive tackle from Duke University. Round 3 pick, 95 overall. He is the first. We've actually talked about Dwayne Carter on this podcast before after the Senior Bowl, because he was great during the Senior Bowl. And there's video of, I think it was Eric or Anthony talking to Dwayne Carter on the field, and basically just said, like, it makes too much sense for this guy to not be on the Bills. Like, just really great. And it turns out they were right, because he's on the Bills now. When I watched him after the Senior Bowl, like, he just really pops. He's not the most complete player in the world, mind you, but he's a very good guy to have in your rotation, right? He's the first 3-time captain in the history of Duke football, which, like, is wild to think about, that there's somebody that can be a captain 3 times for one university. And yeah, he, as you put in our notes here, he played 72%. Take 2. 72% of the snaps in the B gap, 17% of the snaps outside of the tackle, which is great, right? Because that's something that I saw while watching him, was like, this is somebody that you can kind of kick out to defensive end on obvious passing downs and still feel comfortable about him being there. And that allows you some more creativity and flexibility in creating different packages for those sorts of situations. Oh, we haven't had this guy in forever. Oh, man. Sometimes you just love playing the hits, man. All right. Zoo L Zoo says, cut Vaughn failure. Thanks for the $1.99. So, with Dwayne Carter, what I love is just it's versatility. It's leadership. It's seeing somebody in a position of need that is now part of the future, right? It's not because when you look at the defense line, you might look and be like, was that really a need for right now? And the answer would be not really.
Mm-hmm.
The answer would be for the future it is.
Okay.
Because Daquan Jones is only on a 2-year deal. Austin Johnson is on a 1-year deal. The guy that they got from Denver, whose name escapes me?
Deshaun...
That guy.
Williams? Deshaun Williams.
Deshaun Williams, thank you. See, you look at that roster way more than I do. I knew who it was. I just like I don't know what this name is, but what I like is just that none of those guys are going to be a part of the Bills' future plans in all likelihood, right? At least from my own perspective, it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case.
Yeah.
Dwayne Carter now allows you the ability to be like, okay, we have somebody in this rotation that we really, really like. That is somebody that can be a big contributor in games. And because he's part of a rotation now and isn't just like the guy, that will help him as well. Because when you watch this guy, I mean, it's just relentless motor. The strength is there. The leadership is there. It's just a really, really great match. And this when that pick was on the board, when they were at 95, I was like, Dwayne Carter's there. And I really like Dwayne Carter. I really hope they take Dwayne Carter, and they did. So I was very happy with this pick.
I mean, it seems like it's too obvious, right, to take him. He just seems like a process guy through and through, a 3-time captain. And, you know, there's some videos that came out where he just talks about, like, life outside of football, essentially. And he just seems like a really, really good person, by all accounts from these videos I've seen. And that's all I have to go on.
I mean, Duke Football released like a 9-minute video just about him when he got drafted. That's crazy.
It's worth a watch. It was a good video.
Yeah.
I think you hit the nail on the head that he can come in. He doesn't have to be the dude. Like, the main two are Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones, obviously, and then you have Dwayne Carter, Deshaun. Oh my gosh, these names, man. Deshaun Williams and then Austin Johnson. Like, he just has to fit into that rotation. I would say Austin Johnson is probably going to be on the Bills roster, and he's going to be their one tech number 2. I mean, the Bills have already alluded to that idea anyway. So Deshaun Williams and Dwayne Carter, I feel like those are your two that are probably going to be fighting for game day active. I would guess both of them make the roster. I would put Dwayne Carter as the game day active and get him the experience, because he can play behind Ed Oliver. He can spell out Ed Oliver when Ed needs some time. Like we were saying earlier, he can hop to the edge if you really got to go heavy up front. I mean, I don't want him playing edge for the Bills, let's say, but if you're getting absolutely blasted by some running team, you might as well put a little weight out there. You have that ability now, and Greg Rousseau on the other side has that length. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with this pick. I actually love this pick too. It just made way too much sense not to make. So yeah, Dwayne Carter, solid pick in my mind.
100%. Is this like I said, this is one of the guys that we talked about after the Senior Bowl wrapped up, and just he was always in my mind after that sort of look at him during that week. And when the time came around for the draft and you just see his name on the board, I was like, that's a really good one. I still really like him. Like that, my feelings have not wavered during this time, and I was just very happy that was the pick there. Any other thoughts before we move on? I
forgot who said it, and it's not necessarily play style, not anything like that, but he's a guy on the roster for the Bills that's going to be similar to Harrison Phillips. And the idea that fans are going to love him because he's a genuinely good person. He's a solid football player. And it's interesting that Dwayne Carter was taken 95th overall. Harrison Phillips was taken 96th overall. So they're right in the same realm of perceived talent in their respective draft classes.
Chris Jenke says Deshaun Williams, Austin Johnson, and Daquan Jones are all 30-year-old. They're getting younger and cheaper has been a theme of this offseason. The Carter pick fits that to a T. 100% agreed. Mike Malley Guitar says Buffalo now has a very talented and deep roster on cost-controlled contracts. For the most part, that's true, right? Like, there's still some contracts on the team that, obviously Josh Allen being the most you pay your quarterback, right? That's not a cough directed towards any team in particular, just a general cough. But you pay your quarterback if he's a good quarterback. And when you look at the other big contracts on the team, right? Like it's Ed Oliver, who's great. We all agree that Ed Oliver is good now. I don't have to hold up the sign anymore.
I bet
I
you
will.
there's still holdouts. I bet you there's still
There's
holdouts.
probably still holdouts, and they're wrong, and they're allowed to be wrong. That's fine. I can pull up over the cap right now. I mean, we could. We don't have to guess at this. We have the technology is here. So Josh Allen, obviously Von Miller, Matt Milano, Deion Dawkins, and then you get into the sort of that second tier of guys like Taron Johnson, Dawson Knox, and Daquan Jones. When Daquan Jones is sort of like your 10th most expensive contract, then your purging that you did in the offseason was effective, essentially, is what I would say. So this was a necessary move, but also a good one and a smart one. So a good pick by the Bills, in my personal opinion. Another good pick that I actually really liked, Ray Davis from the University of Kentucky. We had Max Toscano on during our day 3 coverage, which was good because I wasn't 100% sure. I knew who Ray Davis was. I recognized the name Ray Davis. I could not have told you what he was like, what his play style was like. And so I was like, hey, Max, you know what this guy is like? And he was like, oh, yeah, this is a good pick by the Bills. So I was like, phew, all right, go on, keep talking. And so when you look at Ray Davis, just a really good overall player. And actually, as Adam Luloff says here, Ray Davis equals Singletary 2.0, bigger and great hands. So on that note, I kind of get where you're coming from in the sense that he's a just generally good overall back. I would say that unlike Singletary, he's not just an all-purpose type of guy. He has a clear role, and that role is to be Thunder. He is the Thunder to James Cook, the Lightning. And you look at how he plays, he's got good physicality, he sees the hole really well, he has very soft hands, and that is a great thing because it means that whoever is on the field, whether it's James Cook or Ray Davis, you're not tipping your hand as to what's going to be happening run versus pass, which is great. That's the sort of thing that really makes that pick sort of work. In addition to that, you have in your notes here, grew up in foster care, has 14 siblings.
Yeah, wild.
And that is wild, first of all. And there's an article in The Athletic, for those who have it, written by Zach Kiefer about his upbringing. Let me tell you something. The first, 2 paragraphs alone will have you just sort of, contemplating life, essentially. Man, just a wild story, and this is sort of like how you talked about Dwayne Carter just being somebody that's very easy for Bills fans to latch onto. Ray Davis is gonna be another one of those guys. It's just this is one of those people where I think you'll probably find in a lot of comments throughout his career, just like, I'm a blank fan, but I will always love Ray Davis.
Oh, I love that. That's good. That's good. Yeah.
Justin Calhoun says Ray Davis 1,000 yards with 3 different schools, 2 of them being SEC schools, which is, yeah, if that doesn't speak to what kind of player he is and his ability to not just play well, but play in different systems and pick up playbooks effectively, come on, this is just a really good player in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be a future Hall of Famer by any means. No. I don't expect him to come out and rush for 2,000 yards this year, but he's a player that the Bills needed. They needed a RB2 that they could have behind James Cook that, like you said, could bring the thunder to Cook's lightning, and that's seemingly what Ray Davis is. Further to that point, I love rooting for people that have gone through absolute adversity, and I don't know if there's a pick you can find in this draft that's had a more difficult time to get to this point. So all the more happy for him. On top of that, the dude's eyes are insane. It's like looking into the sun, but if the sun was beautiful and didn't hurt your eyes. I don't really know how else to describe it. So, I'll be rooting for Ray Davis, and I think he's a good addition to the Bills. It's not just, here's a really good story. The Bills got him on day 3, but no. he's going to be an integral part of this offense in that James Cook does need rest from time to time. Hey, maybe Josh Allen won't have to run a QB sneak every single time we need a yard. Maybe Ray Davis got a little thump to get us there, and we don't have to worry about, Josh twisting his knee in a pile. So this is just I was happy with this pick once I started learning more. And you brought up Max Toscano. He really, really gave some insight into him that got me excited as a Bills fan.
Yeah, it was really good to have him on for that pick in particular, because I was like, okay, I recognize the name. I don't know a ton about him, though, so give me something there. Bills Are Electric says Ray Davis will help keep James Cook fresher later in the year and into the playoffs 100%, like you just said. That's a big part of it. Because James Cook, by the end of the year, was definitely the guy. He wasn't necessarily the only guy, because Ty Johnson would get his carries there, but it was like 7 touches in a game. Right, it wasn't anything where you felt like we've talked this offseason, like we like Ty Johnson, but we like him as RB3, not as RB2.
Yes. And
for most of the end of the season last year, he was not quite the RB2 because they really wanted Latavius Murray to be the RB2. Latavius Murray just wasn't quite what they wanted him to be. So now you have Ray Davis. And to answer Spin's question, does Ty Johnson go to the practice squad? I don't think so, because Ty Johnson plays special teams. Yep. And that's going to be a big part of Ty Johnson's game. And we know the Bills love special teams. And I think that having... They typically have 3 running backs active on game day?
They typically carry 3 with Reggie Gilliam being whatever, he is. So, and actually Chris Janke always has the stats on that. I'm sure he'll tweet them at some point. But I think they carry 3 active RBs at a minimum 2, but 3 will be on the 53.
The 3 schools, by the way, that he had 1,000 yards for, Ray Davis, was Kentucky last year, Vanderbilt the year before, and Temple the year before that. So all D1 schools, all different types of schools, 2 of them SEC schools. And Vanderbilt is not like some, football haven, right, where he just was like, taking advantage of a great system that Vanderbilt has. No, this is a good player. This is just a good player. He may not be the greatest player, but he's a good player. So I think that's going to be a big part of it. Any other thoughts on Ray Davis, whose name, by the way, is Raymond, something like that. Raymond.
Okay.
Yeah, RE''MAHN Davis. Raymond Davis, or Ray. I'm going to go with Ray moving forward.
Yeah, Ray.
All right, moving on. We've got at pick 141 in the 5th round, Sedrick Van Pran-Granger. I say that very slowly so that I said it correctly. I'm still not 100% sure I said it correctly. I feel like saying it in a southern accent makes it sound more correct, but I tried that during the live show on Saturday, and I'm not going to be doing that again. So, Sedrick Van Pran-Granger, center from Georgia. One of the things that was shown during the NFL Network broadcast was center only. And I'm okay with that, right? That's a perfectly fine thing. I like that they got a center this late in the draft that they feel like can actually be a starting center for them. And especially because... Not just because Connor McGovern is sort of I'm still not 100% sure about Connor McGovern at center, even though he's played center a lot in college or whatever. But I do like having somebody that can snap the ball, right? That seems like such a silly thing to overlook or whatever. But I will always remember. I can't remember which year it was. I can't remember if it was 2010, maybe 2011, where Eric Wood had an injury in the middle of the season, and then they had to slide Andy Levitre to center, and every single snap was low and to the left. And I was just losing my mind watching this game, where every single snap was just low and to the left. Part of me was just Fitzpatrick, just one step to the left every time you get to the line. Just make that adjustment. It's fine. But the other part is just like, they clearly did not have somebody on their roster that was consistent enough snapping the ball. In previous years, the Bills had Ryan Bates. Now he's in Chicago. And now you have somebody, again, that can snap the ball, be consistent there, and can be a developmental guy. And I think that that's a big part of this, because especially when you have Aaron Kromer as your offensive line coach, like, you feel confident about quote-unquote developmental guys like that.
Yeah, just real quick, just a mini story for me. The first NFL game I ever went to live in person was Jets against the Bills, and I think it was literally the first snap of the game. I don't know if Bills recovered. I know that it's at least like 35 yards. So yeah, snapping is very important for this.
I'm sure that was a great story. Your internet is not helping you right now, though. So,
jeez. Give me one sec.
Yeah, I got you. So with Sedrick Van, hold on, I need to get the order of this name correct. Sedrick Van Pran-Granger, right? Like, again, having somebody that can be consistent in that position that you know is going to be at least a solid contingency plan in that situation. I like that. I like this is a smart pick. Again, a pick for the future. As Chris Jenkins says, Van Pran-Granger is a huge upgrade over Will Clapp. I'm in agreement with that. RJ says Cedric the Centertainer. I can't take credit for that nickname, though. No. Take credit for it. That's worth taking credit for. Mike Malley Guitar says Granger will battle Edwards for that left guard spot, in my opinion. I believe people when they say that he is basically center only. I'm not sure he's competing for that left guard spot. And especially when you look at some of the other guys that they got later in the draft, like Tylan Grable and Travis Clayton, who were drafted as offensive tackles. Sort of the thing that Aaron Kromer has made a lot of his career out of is taking guys who start at offensive tackle and just sort of saying like, yeah, you're going to be a guard, you're going to be a guard, you're going to be a center, you guys will be tackles, but the rest of you, and like just making tackles into the position that he actually wants them to be. And so I think that that's probably in the realm of possibility for those other two picks. And now that Uber's back, I can stop bantering as much. Let's see. Justin Calhoun also says he had 43 consecutive starts, so that's a huge plus. I agree with that. Uber, I believe you're also still muted, so you can unmute yourself now.
All right, can you hear me better? The internet's still being wonky here.
I can hear you better. So hopefully this will be at least consistent. I say that as soon as I said that, you just froze. That I knew that was going to happen. Let's see. My name is Jeff says report is Kromer went down there and worked him out as a guard. That's probably true. I think that it's also possible that he worked him out at guard and said like, yeah, that's this is a center for me. You know, like it's certainly true that he probably worked out at guard, and maybe he just said, not so much for me. Bills Are Electric says the Bills O-line has a lot of depth now. Ryan Van DeMark, Alec Anderson, center from Georgia, Richard Garage, Lyle Collins, Will Clapp. Like, and that's true. And Uber and I have brought this up throughout this offseason that the Bills were very fortunate in 2023 to have their entire starting offensive line play all 17 games together pretty much all throughout. There were probably a couple of injuries throughout, like in the Week 18 finale against the Dolphins, where there was basically a whole drive where Deion Dawkins was hurt and Ryan Van DeMark had to fill in, but it worked out, right? Like that was fine. The thing is, the odds of that all happening again, where the entire offensive line plays all 17 games, is pretty low. So, you need to be able to have depth that you feel good about. And especially when you're getting rid of someone like a Mitch Morse and you trade away Ryan Bates, you now need to bring in guys that fit a little bit more into what Aaron Kromer likes to do. Because we kind of talked about this before as well, where Osiris Torrance wasn't necessarily the type of guy that Aaron Kromer desires in offensive lineman, but he still made it work. Now you're bringing in guys that sort of seem to fit the mold a bit more for him. And I think it'll be interesting to see how those guys in particular develop. So this was, especially in the 5th round, it's hard to find real good, genuine value with a pick like that in the 5th round. That, to me, was a really solid pick at that position. Yeah, and just another note that Uber wrote here in our notes. In 1,419 passing snaps, pass blocking snaps, he gave up just 1 sack per Pro Football Focus. Take that as you will. How Pro Football Focus charts sacks and sacks given up, I'm not 100% sure. But in either case, it's a good starting point to at least say, hey, this is a very good player who can come in and contribute when he needs to. Joe DeRosa of Under Review says, I'm excited for Sedrick Van Pran, Hermione Granger. Thank you, Joe. I'm not sure. Is that Joe or is that Anthony? I'm not 100% sure now. This is much better, by the way, Uber. This is smooth and connected. So
yeah, Verizon's outside doing work, so
okay.
Don't rip another line out of the ground. My neighbor's yard, so
they chose a great time for that.
8 p.m. on a Monday. Anyway.
Why can't people just work around our very specific needs? Can't they understand this? You need to go out there and be like, hey, next time, just watch the Cover One Roundup. You don't have to be like outside guest stars that screw up the internet for us. Anyway,
sure.
So, I feel like we've discussed Sedrick Van Pran-Granger enough at this point. So we're gonna move on to this name, which is interesting and more difficult than Sedrick Van Pran-Granger. Okay. Edefuan Ulofoshio. That's what I'm going with. And I'm going to call him Eddie from now on. So, Eddie Ulo, linebacker from the University of Washington, grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, which is fascinating because it's hard to do a lot of things in Alaska, period. I feel like it's even harder to find a way to play college or professional football when you're from Alaska because the opportunities are just so sparse and all over the place. Yeah, so this is somebody who's definitely had to work for what he has. You look at his time at Washington, obviously you have written here 94 tackles, 8 tackles for loss just this past season. Yeah, this is just this is somebody, admittedly, I have not really looked at. Oh, okay. Oh, and we have a pronunciation here. Edefuan Ulofoshio. Okay. Okay, so Ulo, not Ulo. Ulofoshio. Ulofoshio. Okay. That I at some point I will get that. I will work on that. But yeah, this is Nabil Mukhtar. I probably said that name wrong, even though you said the name right. So yeah, this is somebody that I want to watch. I don't really have a ton to say, so I'm gonna just sort of pass this off to you.
Yeah, I don't have a massive amount to say either. The Bills' linebacker room's pretty solid right now, so adding another linebacker, the only thing that really makes sense to me is if there's special teams upside here, and there seems to be, and then maybe there's some sort of developmental ability here, and you try to basically round him into a guy that can fill in as maybe your LB3 in the event Milano can't go or Milano isn't the player he once was. Yeah, I mean, it's a 5th-round pick, so at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world if it doesn't work out. The Bills clearly see something here, and I think they've earned a little bit of respect for their ability to scout linebackers, and taking a linebacker in the draft shouldn't be something Bills fans freak out about, because they freaked out about Terrell Bernard, who's been phenomenal after his first year starting.
So, comparing him to Dorian Williams, right? Like, what's the angle here, right? Like Dorian Williams obviously was a topic of conversation after the Chiefs playoff game because everyone was like, oh, you needed to play Dorian Williams and not AJ Klein, whatever. Although, as Bills Are Electric says, you probably never have to call AJ Klein again, which is a positive even in and of itself. God bless AJ Klein. He had moments here with the Bills, but I'm done going back to that particular well. I think that so you still have Medikevich. You obviously have Bernard and no.
Medikevich's gone. Medikevich's gone.
Is he?
Mm-hmm.
I swear, I thought they kept him.
No.
Man, I am all over the place now. Oh, that's right. They brought in Nicholas Morrow. That's right.
Yeah, Morrow. Mm-hmm.
That's right. Okay. That's right. So they bring in Nicholas Morrow. They no longer have Tyler Medikevich. They also lose Tyrell Dotson, as Bills Are Electric brings up here. So there was a need to bring to the linebacker room. Okay, so this is now making more sense to me. This is what happens when I just don't actually pay enough attention before and during the draft, apparently. Okay, this makes a lot more sense. So now you look at the linebacker room. Let's restart this conversation. You now have Bernard, you have Milano, you have Dorian Williams, who you took last year in the 3rd round from Tulane. You have Edefuan Ulofoshio. Edefuan Ulofoshio. Anyway, you have that guy. Along with Nicholas Morrow.
And Balin Spector.
And Balin Spector. Okay. This makes more sense given what the Bills have run out of their linebacker room for the last couple of years, right?
Yeah. I mean, we talk about like Tyler Medikevich now being gone and them bringing in this rookie, and if he supposedly can play special teams, so that could be the role they're looking at for him. I do wonder if the Bills still carry 6 linebackers. That seems like a lot considering their roster makeup this year, but I guess we'll see. He's going to compete for roster spot. I don't think by any means he's guaranteed to make it.
That's fair. Yeah, I think that taking somebody like him is a worthwhile shot, and I'm gonna try and see what I can find of him online, from a film perspective. But yeah, this is what it is, and if you have him basically competing for that last linebacker spot with Balin Spector, cool, right? That's fine. That should be totally fine. That's doing the smart thing, which is sort of churning the bottom of your roster a bit more, so you're not just sitting there stuck with the same guys over and over and over again. Yeah. Any other thoughts before we move on?
No, I think that's exactly where it is. He's going to compete with Balin Spector for that linebacker spot. And then even if he can't beat out Balin Spector, I still think there's a path for him to make the roster. It just depends how the other position groups shape out. And if the Bills value him as a special teams player, like let's say he really, really excels there, he's not really showing much on defense. With the new rules on kickoff, he could be a player that makes the team just because of that.
That's fair. Erivej? So many weird names tonight. The Eddie guy has the same dimensions and almost identical combine numbers as Tyrell Dotson. That's an interesting point to make. You take Dotson out, and another one comes right back in. Hopefully he doesn't
Google his name.
Well, I was just gonna say, hopefully he doesn't search his name on Twitter as much as Tyrell Dotson did.
It's probably a little harder for him to search his name though.
He's probably just sitting there for like hours like, okay, somebody probably spelled it this way. Somebody probably spelled it this way. Alright, moving on to pick 168 in the 5th round, Javon Solomon from the University of Troy. Had 16 sacks for the University of Troy this past season. Yeah, so Troy, as once this pick was made, you then got the sort of oral history of defensive ends to come from the University of Troy, specifically DeMarcus Ware and OCU Minora. And Javon Solomon now comes in having the single season sack record for this university that produced DeMarcus Ware and OCU Minora. So now looking at Javon Solomon, I don't really think that he's going to be on that level, because DeMarcus Ware is a Hall of Famer and OCU Minora was a very special, unique sort of pass rusher. And I don't think Javon Solomon is going to be that, because as you write here, he's only 6 foot, which is in the bottom 5% of NFL prospects for defensive end. So there's something there. And when you watch him on tape a little bit, this is somebody who brings speed and has a bit of a pass rush plan in place. And that to me just reads as like a designated pass rusher, right? Like we talked about Dwayne Carter earlier being like kicked out to defensive end in sort of different packages or whatever. This is another potential piece for these sorts of unique packages in pass rush situations. You have somebody that can have speed, has a plan in place, and if he's coming off the bench and just providing some juice off the edge in very specific spots and moments, and maybe he also contributes on special teams, this to me seems like somebody worth keeping on the roster.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think he can learn from a player like Von Miller that can teach him the finer, points to hand-to-hand combat, essentially, in the NFL, and teaching him how to leverage his body, leverage his speed and technique to get by bigger defenders. I will say, like, the 16 sacks, that's incredible in college football. Like, that is incredible. But I think you do have to take it with a grain of salt to an extent because of the competition at that level he played. Sure. Like, 16 sacks at Troy isn't 16 sacks at Alabama. And just to kind of further that point, he had 8 sacks over the final 5 weeks of the season against Louisiana Monroe, Louisiana, that's the Raging Cajuns, Louisiana, Southern Mississippi, Appalachian State, and Duke. So that was 8 sacks in those 5 games, which, again, it's still impressive because it's legitimate college football where there's legitimate NFL players that are coming from those teams. But he's purely going to be a pass rusher. And if the Bills can kind of find, like, let's say he sneaks in and has 4 or 5 sacks his rookie season. I'm not saying that's going to happen. That'd be a massive success for this pick.
For a 5th round pick, absolutely, yeah.
So I think we'll see. I'm really interested to watch him in preseason because he's going to be going up against 6'6", 320-pound left and right tackles. Can he compete at the NFL level against those guys? If he starts flying by them, then the Bills might have found something here.
Yeah. Iravesh says, that is my name, when I think he's referring to when I said there's a lot of weird names tonight. When I say there's a lot of weird names tonight, that includes me. Like, my last name is Fox. It's spelled Faux, which most people pronounce Faux. I'm not just unfamiliar with weird names and people butchering names. So that's not a shot at anyone. That's just an observation based on my own experiences. Yes, I mean, this is just like when you get into these late rounds, you're not trying to find starters, right? You're trying to find a guy that can contribute in some form and fashion. I think that this is exactly the type of pick that you make at this point. In a similar sense, right, when the Dolphins took Mohamed Kamara like 13 spots earlier, that's somebody who we talked about in our mock draft, right, where this is somebody who's gonna live and die based on being a pass rusher because he's a little bit skinnier, he's a little bit lankier, and in a similar sense, and probably more so for Javon Solomon, it'll be more difficult for him than maybe a Mohamed Kamara, just based on what we know right now. But I really like this pick at this spot. This just makes sense, and I think it's a really good place for him to go as well.
Yeah, and to the Mohamed Kamara point, like, I think in my head and in my feelings, if the Bills have drafted Kamara and the Dolphins have drafted Solomon, I'd be like, oh, the Bills got the better pick. Right. In reality, I have literally no idea, and no one on earth will or does until we see them on the football. There's a very good chance Javon Solomon might be better than Muhammad Kamara. Like that could happen pretty easily. So I don't know. We'll see. It is interesting that the Bills and Dolphins each took a very, very similar player in the fact that they're both very small for the position they play, but they both obviously showed some talent at the NFL level or at the NCAA level.
Exactly. Moving on to Tylan Grable, offensive tackle, at pick 204 in the 6th round. He was a high school quarterback who had 5,000 passing yards in his sophomore and junior seasons, transitioned to tight end in 2018, began transitioning to offensive line in 2019, and was a starting left tackle in 2020. I'm going to be straight up with you. I did not watch either him or Travis Clayton. I don't think anybody outside of Buffalo, like the Buffalo Bills themselves, actually watched Travis Clayton. Yeah, so let's put these two together, right? Like these two, because they're offensive tackles. I don't really know much about them, and I kind of already made my main point about this when talking about Sedrick Van Pran-Granger, which is just getting guys that fit Aaron Kromer's mold. This seems to be the case for both Grable and Clayton. And Clayton obviously is somebody that comes from the NFL International Pathway Program. It's a program that the Bills in particular are very familiar with. Everyone remembers Christian Wade from England and getting that carry for however many yards it was for a touchdown in the preseason and all the fun stuff that went with that. Oh, my God. Yeah, that feels like so long ago now. But like getting both Grable and Clayton is interesting, and it's going to be tough for them to make this roster because they already have some interesting and good backups in Richard Garage and Ryan Van DeMark that have been on this team for a year. It's also possible that they're looking at one or both of these guys and saying maybe this is a backup guard for the future, like we've talked about with Kromer. He takes tackles and he just throws them somewhere. Yeah, I think that this is just helping your offensive line coach feel comfortable and kind of, I don't want to say doing him specifically a favor, because at the end of the day, if you're doing anyone a favor, it's doing Josh Allen a favor by saying, hey, we're putting resources into the offensive line, and we brought this offensive line coach in because he could take guys like this super late and turn them into something worthwhile. Yeah, so that's generally my thought. These are Aaron Kromer and Josh Allen picks, if nothing else.
Yeah, if I had to bet on it, I don't think either of them make the Bills' 53-man roster. They're just not, I don't think in my head I could say one's better than Ryan Van DeMark. Even Lyle Collins, he can step out and play tackle if the Bills desperately needed him to, or they need him to play guard. Who knows? Right. But I do think Tylan Grable has a path to the roster, and the path is beating out Ryan Van DeMark and Tommy Doyle. I don't think it's completely out of the realm of possibility that could happen. I don't expect it to. As for Travis Clayton, he's never played football before. He's not going to make the fit. It would be an absolute stunner if he made the 53-man roster, and it would make me question how much talent you need to be an NFL player. But the Bills can stash him on the practice squad. There's new rules related to the International Pathway Program where you essentially get a free practice squad spot if you have somebody from the IPP. So I think that at a minimum, assuming he's not an absolute disaster and putting other players on the field in danger because he literally doesn't know what he's doing, he'll be on the Bills practice squad as the 17th man. Yeah,
this was in our notes, but also brought up by RJ as well, that picking someone in the pathway program in the 7th is smart because how many 7th round picks wind up on other teams in the same year that we draft them? This way he's almost guaranteed on the team because he also doesn't count as a roster spot in the preseason or the practice squad in the regular season. Mm-hmm. So those are fair things to bring up. Those are fair things, and that's a little tiny little piece of gamesmanship by Brandon Beane, if you want to call it that. And even though there are, we could sit here and say like, oh well, he's never played football. The odds of him making the roster are low. Jordan Mailata is like the textbook version of this program working, where it's like that dude was playing rugby. He had not played football before. He endured years of being berated by Jeff Stoutland in Philadelphia, and he's one of the best left tackles in football now, and that's a success story. That type of success story doesn't happen every year or anything, but it's within a realm of possibility.
Yeah.
So it's worth bringing up. The last pick that we are going to be talking about is Dayquan Hardy from Penn State. This is pick 219 in this draft. He was a 6th-round pick. He's a nickel corner. It's nice to have a backup nickel corner on the roster. And as you put here, 14.6 average on punt returns and 2 touchdowns on punt returns. That's interesting to me, and I like that a lot, actually, because especially when you consider not just punt returns, but also obviously the new kickoff rules. Mm-hmm. Again, we want to talk about how to make a roster. That's how you make a roster right now as a 6th-round pick.
Yeah, and I'm really interested in the new kickoff rules, because in my head, the way that it's going to operate is more similar to a punt return, where you can, I don't know, the full speed coming off the kick return. Full speed coming out of a kick return with some space to build up your speed. It lends itself to vision. This new kick return lends itself to shiftiness. So if maybe punt return abilities fit better in this role, this guy has a chance to make the roster if that's where he kind of excels. And on top of that, you get the backup of he presumably, from everything I've read on him, is a nickel corner. Look, I love Teron Johnson, but he also plays, like I'm going to use this term again, a heat-seeking missile. It's not out of question that he could kind of get banged up throughout the season. If you have a guy you can slot into that role that can play well enough and is very familiar with that style of play, that's always a positive. So Hardy, who's a 6th-round pick, by no means, again, guaranteed to make the roster. There's at least a path. So it's another pick you can look at and say, the Bills saw something here and they said, hey, if we take a 6th-round pick, he could be one of our 53 best players.
Yep, 100%. We're going to very quickly just run through the Bills' undrafted free agents. We're going to go from the bottom of the list to the top. Mm-hmm. So we have Jake Browning, a punter from San Diego State. We have Kenny H. Lovely. That's the name?
That's his name.
Kenny H. Lovely. Okay, that sounds like a name from a Key and Peele sketch. Rondell Bothroyd. Defensive end from Oklahoma. David Ogwegbu. I'm struggling with these names. Defensive end from Houston. Branson Dean, defensive tackle from Miami. Gunnar Britton, offensive tackle from Auburn. Keaton Bills. I mean, come on. Really? Keaton Bills?
Yes, dude.
Went to the Bills.
I should have put a fake name on here. I really should have put a fake name on here.
Offensive guard from Utah. Xavier Johnson, wide receiver from Ohio State. Lawrence Keys, wide receiver from Tulane. And son of Buffalo Bills legend Frank Gore Jr., running back from Southern Mississippi. Any thoughts on any of these guys for you?
The only one, and this is not from watching any film or anything on him, the only one of these guys that I look at and I'm like, well, I guess there's a couple, but the main one I look at that could legitimately make the roster is Keaton Bills. So he's from Utah. He played with Dalton Kincaid and played with Cole Bishop. Not that guarantees him a roster spot at all, but he was at least projected as a 6th-round pick, and he's a guard. Like, I don't love the Bills' guard depth right now. I had mentioned Lyle Collins before, but he's pushing 30. Who knows what he is? I don't even think he played last year. I might have that wrong. And then Richard Garage, like, cool UDFA last year. Like, is he going to make the roster as one of their top, 8, 9, 10 linemen? Like Keaton Bills, maybe he comes in and he's like pissed off he didn't get drafted and he's actually a solid football player. Him and Jake Browning too. I don't know why San Diego State has all the punters. He actually is a punter and a kicker as well. Could he beat out Matt Hawk and Sam Martin? Yeah.
I hope so.
Yeah, he could.
I'm tired of those two guys punting for the Bills. I'm sorry. I know that they're just doing their jobs. I'm tired of it.
I feel like this is going to be a little lesser of the discussion with Matt Ariza, where it's like, can he hold?
Right, yeah. That's fair. Any other final thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, I mean, I think it's just a solid. I keep getting asked by like people that aren't big football fans that know
Sure.
I'm a crazy psychopath when it comes to the
Yes.
watching the draft and watch every second. They're like, "Oh, did the Bills have a good draft? Oh, we've heard they've had a bad draft. Oh, we heard they had a great draft." I'm like, dude, I like the strategy of what they did. I get why they drafted these players. No one knows. Literally no one knows. When the Colts drafted, who were the two they drafted that were both all pros the rookie season? It was Darius Leonard
And Quentin Nelson.
When that draft, people were like, "Oh, Darius Leonard sucks, dude. He's not gonna be good at all." So yeah, when people tell you they've had a good draft, great draft, bad draft, awful draft, no one knows right now. Come talk to us in 3-4 years.
Exactly. Thank you all for watching the show tonight. This is always a great time. It's always a sad time as well, because it means that the exciting part of the offseason is over, and now we kind of enter our dark period, where it's, not a lot really happens. It's tough, but we will be here throughout the whole offseason. We'll have different ideas for how to keep you all entertained and hopefully not quite like scratching for some actual football any more than you are already, obviously. So it's going to be a long off season. It always feels like a long off season, but I think that there is hope with this Bills team. I like where this draft class came from. I like where the potential is, and I'm interested in seeing how this all plays out come the fall, and we'll figure out some stuff to do during the offseason. But suffice to say, it's always a great time to talk about the draft. It's always a tough time to talk about the draft because it just sort of sucks knowing that there's so little in between now and basically training camp is your first like little drop of football content to kind of keep you sane until the regular season starts. Uber, where can the people find you?
At UberHansen on Twitter. I know it's the off season for the Bills. It's never the off season for my liver, so I will be continuing to tweet absolute drunk nonsense. Somebody asked earlier in the chat if I finished both bottles of wine on Saturday. Oh yes, I did, and a beer to go along with it. So
you all can find me at DFAUXY or at DFoxy on Twitter. Like I said, we'll be here throughout the off season. We will take a look at different things. We'll brainstorm some ideas. We'll try to have some other people on, so it's not just us two talking this entire off season about whatever we want to talk about. We'll try and get some other people in here, get some fresh voices in here, and maybe some other voices that you recognize. Who knows? For now, though, this is the Cover One Roundup, and we are going to be done for tonight, and we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.